Alright, good morning. We're going to tie today a Craig Matthews pattern from Yellowstone, Montana. This is an X-Caddis. This is going to be tied on a Tiemco 100 SPBL, which is sort of my default dry fly hook. Of course, you can tie it on a regular 100 or any standard dry fly hook for that matter. And I'm going to tie this with GSP 50. So this is very small diameter, very slick, but very strong thread. And it only comes in white, so I'm going to use the white, and it's really not going to make a difference because it's not going to show on the finished fly. So what I'll do here is I'm going to start this thread up here a couple eye lengths behind the hook eye. With this slick thread you want to make a sort of an extended jam knot so that you can't pull it off. And for the shuck I'm going to use about a half a strand of ginger or amber colored Zelon, and this is straight Zelon. Kinky Zelon would work just fine. I'm going to cut the end square, and I'm going to move my thread back up to my start. You can see I didn't make a whole thread base there on the hook, I just started the thread. I'm going to catch this Zelon and pull it down to length, anchor those butt ends down, and then wrap over it to about midpoint on the hook or so. Now I'm going to take some superfine dubbing, and this is brown, but you can obviously use whatever color you like. And I'm going to dub the thread in a fairly thin strand. You can see I've got some bare thread between the end of the dubbing and the hook shank here, and that's on purpose. So I'm going to hold on to this shuck now. And I'm going to wrap back over it using that bare thread to come all the way back to the bend so that my first turn of dubbing comes around right at the bend of the hook. Now what that just did is kept me from having to make two layers of thread, one down, one back, and then using up that bare thread along the shank, so I'm able to keep a little bit thinner body. So I'm going to dub forward from the bend, and I'm just going to build a bit of a taper up to the front here. I can see I want just a touch more dubbing. Add just a bit there, because what I want to do here is build a nice square shoulder on the front of this dubbing, and as I run out I want to be up on that bare shank behind the hook eye. So now I'm going to pull my shuck forward. I'm going to trim it off just beyond the hook eye, and then I'll come in from the end. I don't like these real square cut ends, so I'm going to trim those just from the ends here. You can see I'll sort of angle the scissor blades and rag that up a bit so it's not quite so square cut. I want a little bit more ragged cut there. And for the wing I'm going to use coastal deer, and what coastal deer is very fine, proportionally shorter deer hair. And I want to take a clump that is significantly bigger than you'd think you'd need for a size 16. Kind of give you an idea of what I've just cut off the skin here. So a pretty good sized bunch. That's a bigger diameter than a pencil. And to clean out that underfur I'm going to use my wire dubbing brush here, Collier dubbing brush, and I'll just brush that underfur out. You can see I'm holding the hair as close to the tips as I can manage, and that will comb out all that dubbing like underfur and get it much more cleaned out than it started. So now I'll take this hair and I'm going to put it in a medium-sized stacker. That's how big a chunk it is. It's got to go into the medium stacker. I'll stack that up nice and neat so I've got nice even tips there. This is why you shouldn't clean your deer hair out right next to your vise. You end up with underfur everywhere. I'll reverse this clump of hair so that the tips are facing backwards. And I want this clump to extend from the hook eye back to the bend of the hook. So I'm going to get that measurement there, and I'll cut those butt ends off just as square across as I can. Now I'm going to spin my thread just a bit. Now this GSP thread is very thin and very strong, and if you spin it too much it can cut through the hair, so I'm just going to spin it a bit to coil it up. My thread's hanging right at the front edge of the body. I'm going to lay those butt ends up so they're just behind the hook eye. You can see I want to keep those butt ends square. You can see how I can maneuver my hand to keep them square at a right angle to the hook. I'm going to put one turn around and the second turn right behind it. And as I go to tighten this thread, I'm going to hold onto the wing, I'm holding onto the hook, and I'm going to pull the thread toward me to tighten it. And you can see those butt ends flare down in place. Now, without letting off the tension, I'm going to wrap tightly spaced turns forward through those butt ends, right up to the hook eye. And when I get there, I can sweep those butt ends back, and you see how they'll form a little muddler-esque head. And I'll come in and a whip finish just behind the eye. And you can see with this midge-size whip finisher, I can sort of maneuver this under those butt ends. I'll trim my thread out. Now, if you've got any hairs, I see I've got a couple on the far side. If you've got any hairs that are sticking below the hook shank, you can come in and trim them out individually. What I typically do is I'll just sort of grab anything that's sticking down and trim that off flat there. And sort of preen those butt ends back. Leaving those butt ends on like that makes a much more buoyant fly. It just leaves a lot more of the hollow part of the deer hair on the finished fly. You can kind of see what we're getting there. And then one last thing I always do on these is I'm going to take and I'll turn this upside down, and I'll take some Solarez Ultra Thin. Before this stuff it was always a little shot of head cement, but this works even better. And I'm going to put just a drop of it against the base of that wing and head. And I'll grab my UV light and I'll turn this over so you can see this. Now, one of the cool things about this Solarez is watch when I cook it, it'll actually tighten the thread wraps and make that hair stand up a bit more. You can see some of that hair move. And that is anchored firmly in place. That wing's not going anywhere. So there's our finished X-Caddis. Really an effective fly, very quick, easy, and cheap to tie. Just 3 materials, some dubbing, some deer hair, and some Zelon. Don't forget that GSP thread. It makes a big difference on a fly like this. I like to tie them fairly heavy like this. I've always reasoned that I could thin them down on the water if I needed to. But as of yet, that has never occurred. So there's your X-Caddis. I hope you enjoy it. Get to work.